And now we're on. The participants can see us and hear us.
Lovely. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Building Security Excellence across the UNSMS Training Capacity and Response Readiness. My name is Florian Balker. I'm the Chief Security Information Management with the World Food Programme, and I have the honor to moderate today's discussion. So today we're here to look at what security excellence means in practice, how learning, training, and capacity development translates into better judgment, stronger preparedness, and better decisions under pressure. Before we begin, it's important to name the context that you're all aware of that we're operating in, but that's surely affecting training capacity development and will be cross-cutting through the discussion here. We see more conflict, more fragmentation, a more multipolar environment that's driving more demand on the humanitarian side on our organizations, while the resources for humanitarian actions are tightening and many donor budgets are under pressure as national priorities shift, including towards defense. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres openly said that chronic underfunding means mandates will increasingly have to be prioritized, scaled back, or discontinued, which is a shift that's normally called less with less. So the question for us today is very practical. What does that really mean for learning capacity development? What should we prioritize? How do we keep learning relevant? And how do we protect readiness when time and money are constrained? Today we'll do a moderated conversation first, and then we have an open floor for a Q&A. So please use the Q&A function so that we can track the questions efficiently. Today I'm very happy to be joined here by three distinguished colleagues, each bringing a different but very complementary perspective: system-wide training, organizational leadership and culture, and operational delivery. Let me start first welcoming Anne Carlson. Anne is the Deputy Principal Security Coordinator at UNICEF. She's served as a regional security advisor for UNICEF for East Asia and the Pacific, and brings in also strong analytical foundation from her work as analyst in previous roles, as well as risk assessment. So her perspective bridges the field realities with the leadership support and how build a culture for continuous learning. Welcome, Anne. Second, we have Benjamin Uso-Frimpong. Ben is representing UNDSS Training and Development. He has a long experience across security training and field leadership roles. He has recently served as the officer in charge of UNDSS Training and Development Service. So he brings in the UNSMS wide lens, coherence, standards, scalable delivery. Hello and welcome, Ben. And last but not least, Jamie Farrell, HQ security specialist with UNDP. Jamie has an extensive experience across high-risk environments and headquarter security functions. Has a strong track record in practical readiness, crisis preparedness, training that aims for real performance under pressure. So good to see you here, Jamie. So I'll try to run this as a conversation. I'll ask one person at a time, a couple of questions or one question, and then bring it back and move us to the next question that will hopefully make that a flow. So allow me to start with you, Ben. Security training costs time, money, and to organize training is quite an organizational effort always. So what is the return on that investment? What is the value proposition of security training?
Thanks, Florian. Yeah, and hello, everybody. Yeah, everything that we do in the UN, every activity costs money, and so does security training. It costs resources, it costs time, it costs the time of our personnel. So it's not really a question of the cost, it is what training does. or what's the benefits, what it prevents and what it enables. In the UN, security is cast as an enabling role to support the delivery of programs. And when our personnel are trained to assess risk, to make sound decisions under pressure, and to work as a coordinated team, we avoid preventable incidents. We protect our personnel and we keep our operations going. Most of our security professionals come from different walks of life, different areas of expertise from their various backgrounds. And so the first challenge is to make them all sing from the same sheet of music, which the UN operating environment represents. And then we build on that. So that means we can keep operations running, singing from the same sheet of music. Aid continues to reach communities. People perform better, leaders make decisions, and the organization reduces its financial and legal exposure, in addition to prevention of the loss of lives of our personnel. So it's not about compliance or ticking a box. It's always about assuring missions, enabling them, and it is what security training is what allows us to deliver safely and sustainably in some of the most complex environments in the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. So what I take from you is that training prevents preventable or avoidable harm and protects operational continuity. So then my next question would be, how do we keep learning continuous? Because we know that you don't learn once and you know it forever, and everything that you've just picked up will stay in your head, and especially under pressure. Anne, can I ask you, training is often treated as and Ben just said it, as a tick in the box compliance exercise rather than a continued investment that evolves alongside the staff and the staff members' growth in their responsibilities, in the changing environments, and the deepening operational expertise and experience that our colleagues. So what does a general culture of continuous security learning look like across the UN system?
Thanks, Florian, for the question, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. When it comes to a continuous learning culture, I want to go back to some of the things that Ben mentioned, right? Security is about enabling program activities, and it's about enabling people to deliver these activities. So not just what we want to do, but who is going to go do them, right? A continuous learning culture encourages everyone to continuously increase and improve their knowledge, their skills, as they move through day to day, week to week. It's relevant not just to security professionals. We're not just talking about training for security professionals, but for all of our program staff, and especially for decision makers, right? Ben mentioned the importance of timely security decision making, being able to make decisions under pressure. This is something that you can't do in a one-off training course. This is something that you learn and that you practice continuously. It's about engaging and adapting in the office, in the team, and finding different ways to learn, right? Peer-to-peer learning, discussions, practical exercises that make it kind of fun, right? Regular things like communication checks, right? Some people find it tedious, but in the moment when you need to, you know how to use the radio, you know how to use the different satellite phones or whatever it is that you might need to use in a crisis. I think when we have a culture of continuous learning and security is a professional competency for everyone, and it's not a compliance checkbox. In practice, we're not there, but we're getting there, right? So some of the things that are important to see how this looks in practice is that learning pathways in security align with career life cycles, right? So you're a staff member, a junior staff member, maybe middle management working in a field office. And as you move up to more progressive leadership roles, you have security-related training that focuses on decision-making in a crisis, decision-making in leadership, and it's all tied together, right? So it adapts to not just individuals in their career path, but the various contexts that we're in. So you get security training when you get to a new duty station, before you go on a surge deployment, when you're in and managing an office, say a field office, or managing a team. We retake certain courses on a regular period just to refresh skills if you haven't had the opportunity to practice them. And again, it's not just like training courses. We do drills, we do exercises, we do peer exchanges, after action reviews. This could be as small as after we go out on a field mission, we come back, the team just has a discussion. How did that go? Did anything happen? Could we have been better prepared? Should we do this differently? Should we look at our SOP differently? So it's really a day-to-day practice. And I just want to take the opportunity because I know we have several of our partners in the field that when it comes to continuous learning, it's also about learning together, right? It's not a UNICEF learning event. It's not a UN learning event. We deliver with our partners. We need to train and learn together with our partners. I'll pause there. Thanks, Florian.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I like that idea of a learning culture very much. And thank you for mentioning the AR approach, which to me is something that, as you said, needs to be embedded in day-to-day life. And this is also a leadership thing for me. It's like not brushing all my mistakes under the carpet or shut everybody up who dares to tell me that I've done something wrong, but actually encouraging the feedback to improve. Otherwise, how do we if we don't allow mistakes and address them? So let's get even more practical. Jamie, we've seen that the learning environment and the learning conditions have significantly changed over the last, well, less than a decade. We've seen with COVID-19 suddenly everybody being having to learn how to operate something like this here today, a video conference, do online training and so forth. And even after the COVID went away, also the funding went away. So we also couldn't go and have face-to-face training events because we couldn't travel any longer. And of course, it's an efficiency measure. It's a matter of reach and convenience. What have you learned from that shift?
Thanks, Florian. It's a great question, and you know it already ties in some of the comments that Anne has made and Ben has made, and you know, and you touched on the transition to a sort of an online learning approach as a resource or a cost-saving measure, and you know, and Ben touched on that in his opening response. I want to sort of maybe reflect on that as well and consider, when we're talking about costs of training things, what are our opportunity costs if we don't train our people, and so on as well? And that's something that doesn't necessarily always get well considered. But in terms of the approach to online training delivery and what it can bring us, or maybe what it doesn't bring us, I think what we're doing today is a really good example of something that's done well. We can share ideas, we bring in a bigger audience, and it is cost and time effective for many of us to do it this way. On the flip side, what we can see, and this goes a little bit to some of what Anne was talking about, was a referral backed or an approach that relied on online training only risked becoming a compliance and check box measure. It's something that organizations felt like they needed to do some training. This is an easy way to do it. It can be relatively cheap and we get broad scale. So let's do it online. Check, mission accomplished. And I think what we see is that's the bad way of looking at it, and you know, the least effective approach that we can consider. I think what we're seeing in terms of some good examples, and one that we discussed previously was the CRIM course, the Kidnap for Ransom Incident Managers course. The way that's done, I think, is a good example. And it builds on a sort of a phased approach in that you do an online self-paced clicking through learning at the participants' own pace, and readiness through reading, quizzes, and videos and things like this, accommodating different learning styles. Then there are synchronous webinars from subject matter experts in the next phase. And then in the third phase, the participants are put through simulations. Again, all online via Zoom or Teams, whatever the methodology is. But it's a good way of building on a structure that caters to different learning styles and ensures that there is participation and engagement with the participants and the learners. I think for me, and I'm horrible at online learning myself. It's one of the things that just doesn't work for me so well. The self-paced stuff risks people just trying to rush through and click it and get it done for compliance sake, right? So I think what we're seeing now is the experience from COVID and the way things improved and doing things better is that varying the approaches to online learning, doing the different methodologies and different practices to ensure engagement, that's been an up curve and enhanced the way that we use it. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I hear you that it can be powerful, but don't let it be I think everybody has used the checkbox metaphor right now, all four of us. So clearly the message that this needs to be avoided. And can you tell me from your experience the simple question, what works and what doesn't?
Thanks, Florian, and you'll hear me echo a lot of what Jamie just mentioned. I think with online learning, right, it's scalable across the world. We can put something online, colleagues can take it, even real-time webinars, right? We can arrange the timing to work for colleagues around the world on less cost, less travel burdens. One of the things that we did find once we got better at this during COVID is that there was a real increase in on-demand options. So particularly for colleagues who were keen to learn about something, there were different courses out there. There were different platforms available for you to learn on topics that interest you and that are relative or that are relevant to you moving forward. For online learning, that kind of baseline standard knowledge, quicker packages works really well. We can also update it fairly quickly and get it out to the globe if information changes, if standards change, if a new best practice is out. It's easy to change an online learning package or run one quick webinar, and that information is out quickly. And as Jamie mentioned, it's important that it's not just an online course that you click through, but we did a lot more online peer-to-peer engagement, sharing. Those discussions are really important. And that links to kind of what didn't work, right? Because adults learn in different ways. And when it comes to security learning, it's about people and their teams, right? Working together. No one does anything in isolation. And a lot of people, like myself, you learn by doing. And there's only so much doing in an online format that you can do. What we found is that completion doesn't mean comprehension, right? And you mentioned it. You can click through an online course. I'm done. I have the certificate. I have no idea what was in there, right? Doesn't mean I actually took anything away from it. It gives limited opportunities for those kind of high-risk, stress-based skills, right? As Ben mentioned, under pressure, when you need to take an action or when you need to make a decision, some of these online platforms, it's much more challenging to mimic that stress, that high risk. Some have found it, right, the CRIM program, but it's blended. It brings things together in different mechanisms. I think the other thing when it comes to learning is that if you don't practice, in the end, how much real change is there, right? So a one-off course, a one-off webinar, does it really lead to behavior change? And that we found that it's less effective than in person where people come together, they get that feedback on, oh, you're doing this well, you need to work on this part. And again, there was just so much online that I think we all had Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue, online learning fatigue, so that even if it worked for you at the beginning, it became a little bit exhausting to always be on the screen. So I wholeheartedly agree with Jamie in that in the future, it's really about blended learning, right? There's some things that work really well digitally, in person or on demand, but simulation and practice and learning by doing together with others, because you will deliver together with others, is really what's important for that continuous learning and behavior change. Thanks, Florian.
Thank you, Anne. So yeah, I understand the common message is things need to go hand in hand. one for efficiency, scalability. Also, I think inclusion, you can very quickly do an online, relatively quickly in different languages, but you don't have to have all the expertise sent around the globe. But the human elements, the feedback mechanism and everything that needs to be there. When it comes to high stake competencies like emergency medical response, hostile environment awareness, crisis decision making, what does the evidence tell us about what it takes for learning to really stick and translate into real behavior, as you just said, and behavioral change when it matters most, when people are under stress, when they cannot go back to the online and click through it to understand how was it to take shelter. Jamie, from your experience.
Yeah, I think, Florian, part of this, we recognize the importance of those particular skill sets that you mentioned within the UNSMS, in that the training that we do give to people who need those courses, it's typically been protected and continues to be face-to-face training, whether it's the DO and crisis management training that Ben and colleagues in DFO have delivered over the past few goes around, or our first responder programs, the IFAC, the individual first aid course, and the emergency trauma bag courses. You know, those remain on live in-person, face-to-face programs. And so I think we see the relevance of doing that in person. Why? It's skill fade. Skill fade is a very real concern for these things. And let's specifically touch on the medical training that we give to personnel in higher risk duty stations. There's a reason that professional medics have to recertify with a certain particular frequency, right? And I think this is one thing that it's a common topic of discussion for us within our circles. You know, should our SAFE course, our field environment course, should that be a recertification course? Do we need to redo it every 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it might be? And I think I'm very much in favor of the approach that we've taken with the medical training, that we do need to recertify, to relearn, to redemonstrate that we have the competencies and skills to show those, to demonstrate that we have those skills still. And to brush them up. It's something that I often reflect on. In a different lifetime, I was in the Navy, and every day that one is deployed on a ship, whether it is on the high seas or you are on a port visit somewhere, or you're in a maintenance period in your home port, every single day the personnel on that ship do at least one training exercise. Whether it's a small fire exercise or a casualty exercise or something like that, there is this process of continuous practice and upkeep of skills. And I think that's something that we don't necessarily have so well drilled down, particularly in the UNSMS. I think in some areas it's improving, but I think because we have a multitude of competing demands on the times of people, particularly, and the other resources, it's something that we're challenged to do. So I think to come back to your particular question, regular practice, whether it is face to face, some of the things that Anne was talking about in terms of just debriefs, lessons learned, exercise, peer-to-peer exchange. We can do these things with greater frequency than we do. And I think that would show a higher degree of efficacy. Over.
Thank you. So your message is, it's not good enough to go to the gym once in your lifetime to keep your six-pack, right? I think the same applies for any learning. And I hear on the skill fade, surely if you don't practice that, that becomes a problem. And I hear you on the SAFE to copy what is done for the medical ones, but I'm afraid that we also currently see the inverted trend that people are pushing for the emergency trauma training not to expire or something. As for me, it's like when was the last time that I put my hands on somebody's chest and pumped to a certain rhythm? I haven't done it for a while, then I will surely forget about it. And building on that, from your perspective, what holds then learning under stress? What actually makes it stick when it really matters?
Thanks, Florian. And I think it really is about practice, but practice under stress. So, or even under distraction, right? We need what we call stress inoculation so that it becomes muscle memory in these tasks that you might need to perform in a crisis, whether it's using the radio and making a report, whether it's first aid. Drivers do this quite a bit, right? You need to practice so that in that moment, the muscle memory is there. So practical exercises are really a key part of that, and structured debriefs, structured discussions, right? You did this, I did this, how did it work? So realistic scenarios and exercises, things that feel real to get that stress or that risk feeling as you're learning, as you're practicing. It feels more consequential. It feels more important, right? Practicing with your team feels more important because I'm not just learning the skill for me, I'm learning it for the colleagues I might need to use it with in the coming weeks and months. So these team-based exercise, how we work together, how we practice these skills together so that when something happens, we're ready together to respond, right? These coordination parts, the working together part is as important as the individual skills. Thanks, Florian. I'll pause there and hand back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I see your picture, and I know also who I can rely on in that situation more or less, and what I have to do to up my game, so people can also start relying on me, who I miserably failed during that training and was never picked for the team or so. Ben, from a system and training management angle, what has there to be in place organizationally so that practice doesn't remain optional, and how do we make this a shared responsibility rather than something just a training unit carries?
Thanks, Florian. I think you used the key word, the shared responsibility. I look at what my section does, and what we do is based on the policy and procedures that are system-wide. We try to bring people up to speed with this. But there's 53 organizations, and we are present in almost every country. So it's difficult for a unit as small as ours to reach everybody. Now, most of us in positions of management have security training or security preparation as part of our terms of reference. So it's a full court press. It's an all hands on deck, and it's a shared responsibility between not just our section, but all the training sections of the various UNSMS organizations, down to country level, where principal, chief, and security advisors have to prepare their people for this. And so a lot of this is happening. And I mean, for the people around this table, you all know, like Jamie has picked up the security certification program and has put an in-person part to it, and is disseminating this in a practical way in-person sessions. UNICEF is doing same, WFP, a lot of other organizations. But this is where the pickup should come from the general training that is provided across the board, across the system, to detailed training on organization-specific or entity-specific training issues that brings the training to life and gives people a chance to practice more and to prepare more. Thanks. Back to you.
Thank you, Ben. You mentioned the country level, the field. We're sitting comfortably in some lovely headquarter locations, 20 degrees, almost blue sky in Rome. Not as blue as the background of UN. I think it's raining in New York. But where the risks are really going up is the places that are furthest and farthest from those locations where we conjure up what is best to be trained on, how to do these things. So where do you see the most significant gaps between what staff on the ground need and what the system's currently delivering? Ben. You're muted.
Power went off in Nairobi, just came back on. Yep.
Did you hear my question? Yeah.
Yeah, could you repeat
my
it,
question
please?
was, I was alluding to the what do we do? What does the system do for those who are most affected or most exposed to risk? Those people on the front line, on the humanitarian front line. Where do you see the most significant gap between what they need in terms of training capacity building and what the system currently is able to deliver?
Yeah, for frontline staff, and you're right about where they are and how they can get the training, the tailored training that they need. It's the training they usually need is practical, hands-on, and scenario-based, because it prepares them for the realities they might actually face. The biggest gaps that I see is accessibility. Usually the highest or the most complex security issues and the training that is required to address them happen in quite remote areas. And so they don't, a lot of the time, the staff don't get timely training. I've seen this time and again. What is sometimes available it's not tailored to the local context. Now, closing that gap means making training more flexible, context-driven, and directly connected to the situation that staff encounter every day. Now, Jamie mentioned this challenge. We get the challenge that we face in getting new information across the system in a timely way. But we're continuously working on improving our trainer networks. We have a network of trainers. We prepare them to deliver training on behalf of the section to whoever needs it. And we're setting up the platforms. They are not complete. It's not perfect. But an important part of this process is for personnel in the field to proactively and on a continuous basis inform the HQ on what their specific needs in training may be. This is one way, or certainly the most reliable way of getting us to develop tailored training solutions. Currently, our system is not too, it's working, but it can be improved. We have the Standing Committee on Learning and Training for the whole UNSMS, and we have developed a practice of including training innovations that each organization may be practicing the use of AI or other methods of training. We've added this to the monthly agenda, and this enables us to share information across the training focal points, at least, hoping that it will be disseminated. So it's a work in progress. We're getting there. We're not quite there yet. Thanks.
I think that's more or less the same what I heard Em saying. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. Jumping from those people who implement the humanitarian mandates to the decision makers. And you mentioned Ben's involvement in crisis management earlier. At the leadership and decision maker level, where security decisions, where judgments intersect with programmatic and with operational requirements, with lots of pressure. With lots of pressure also on the financial side, funding side. You have, we said, the SG talks about less with less, but that's not necessarily what the language that everybody says that still needs to see deliverables. How can we better support decision makers in security learning? And Ben, I think I would like to hear that from you. And Ben, I have asked you 2 questions already, but let me ask you the 3rd in a row. What's your take? And if you could turn on the mic, because not everybody is fully trained in lip reading yet.
I'm sorry. I'll say thanks for the question. At the leadership level, security risk never exists in isolation. It comes with operational and political pressures and urgent humanitarian needs. So all security advice is given in this context, and we try not to lose sight of it. Now, to truly support UN decision makers, we use practical scenario based exercises. Examples are from the the crisis management training that the Division of Field Operations conducts for SMTs and for designated officials. And we use this just to clarify the accountability and early integration of security into program planning. So it's part of the conversation right from the get-go. Now, peer learning plays a big role, especially in crisis management training, because when we bring together decision makers from different places, they have different experiences, and they are able to, help each other, relate their experiences, and get others to pick up. The goal is to equip leaders to make informed decisions when operational and security pressures collide. I think one of the best examples I saw of peer learning in crisis mode actually didn't come from us, sorry to say. It came from OCHA. They had a recent exercise which they called crisis, courage in crisis. And it was excellent. It was no faults, just dilemmas, scenarios, and everybody relating their experiences and saying, did you think of this? Did you think of that? And I handled it like this. How did you deal with that? And it was such a great learning environment because it was so no fault, just open discussion, safe space. And for me as a security professional, I found that the more they discussed and the more they went into the challenges that they face making decisions and what they have to consider, the more nuanced and more tailored my security advice became. So I found that there's a need for security decision makers, humanitarians, resident coordinators, perhaps to put it in a way, to get into each other's thinking, because the outcome of this synthesized thinking on all decision makers and security professionals produces the best results and the best results that we can get under the circumstances. Back to you, Florian.
Thank you, Ben. And do you have any point that doesn't praise OCHA?
No.
No, anything from your side that you can compliment that as well?
Yeah, I think decision making is one of those things that you need to practice. So when it comes to designing, you need real scenarios, real decision making dilemmas that reflect the complexity that a decision maker will face. And security is only one piece, right? So how we develop a scenario and bring it together, it can, you can't just have a security tabletop. You need to include business continuity. You need to include emergency response in there because, different political contexts, pressures on the organization, on the humanitarian community, for example. So designing these scenarios and bringing real case studies together that reflect the reality that a decision maker will face. Again, that stress inoculation, practice under stress as real as possible, and with their peers, as Ben mentioned, that no fault, the discussion. Let's talk through whether we're testing our plans. Let's talk through what the plan looks like. What are we missing? Where are our gaps? I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not there yet, but Florian seems to have his part done, right? And that practice, that awareness really improves decision-making over time. The other thing I'll mention is that leadership occurs at various levels. And I'll tie back to my comments earlier about security training being part of a career pathway, right? So decision-making, just because you're currently a decision maker, we don't focus only on them, right? We have future leaders, right? Involving these different scenarios and dilemmas, and particularly in field locations, right? Field offices, for us, our chiefs of field offices, those outpost level, they also work on these same kind of decision-making dilemmas that they will face. And it also prepares them in the future for their leadership path as they move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. So I hear the need for realism in the training dilemmas, and again the importance of watching your peers, providing the feedback, again the culture that we spoke about earlier, and to somehow tie it to a scenario that seems realistic enough for people that they actually bother and don't find that just a very far off issue that just for learning purposes exists. Jamie, we started the conversation with a hint to the financial situation and the idea that security training is an investment. what value does a sustained investment in learning and capacity development for security professionals and for our colleagues who are not security professionals and for decision makers bring?
I'm quite lucky on this one. You know, in a different meeting recently, Ben told me I was living the dream as a security trainer. In that, for me, UNDP has recognised the importance of security training, and we do have a very positive resource provision towards that approach. And I think the value that we get out of that is, and again, this has touched on something that both Ben and Anne have said earlier. We increase the ability of our people, their readiness to prevent, to avoid, to not get involved in these types of incidents in the first place. An ounce of prevention is better than a kilo of cure, or whatever the saying is. So by being proactive about it and training people to prevent, to avoid, to not get caught up in incidents in the first place, but them to be able to respond to them if they need to, I think this is huge organizationally. And in UNDP, we've invested heavily over the last couple of years in WSAT training specifically. We do specific workshops for our security practitioners. We bring the practitioners at the local staff and the international level from regions together, and we work through particular skill sets, from crisis response to soft skills, including communication and influencing and things like this. We're building up towards doing the same for our security decision makers. So we've recognized that there is absolute value that builds tangibly and practically to enhancing those skill sets. And I think from the specific position of the security professionals, Florian, you used the phrase earlier, you try to build the position that somebody can rely on you, rely on me. And I think that is something that we put particular emphasis on for our security professionals. We very much value this idea that they are credible, reliable, trustworthy, and these are people that our staff and the security decision makers can look to in times of crisis, but also before that, and I think this touches on what Ben was saying about having the training, the joint venture trainers, as they're called, across the UNSMS system. They are force multipliers, and I think it's important for all security professionals to be a force multiplier in improving the readiness of their colleagues before the worst happens. So, I would like to think that the people that come to our training courses, or even me on the very rare occasions I get deployed to the field these days, on a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, the colleagues can look to me as Jamie, someone that they have faith in to give them advice about program enabling. We're enablers. And I can work to support them in doing their jobs. But also, we want our people to be able to look to our security professionals when the stuff goes bad and say, okay, these are the people that we can rely on to guide us, to help us get through the worst of the situations. So, yeah, big question. What is the value of training? It's so many things, but I think that maybe some points there.
Thank you, Jamie. Ben, if we want Jamie to continue living the dream, but not daydreaming or yesterday dreaming, how do we ensure that? And we've been talking about the target audience so far, but not about the trainers themselves. How do we, apart from living the dream, how do we sustain the capacity of trainers to deliver security learning programs that matter for not yesterday, not only for today, but for tomorrow?
Thanks. I think it's about, it's a lot of things. We have a large body of trainers, people employed as trainers and those who are joint venture trainers. And it's about keeping each other informed, connected, and supported. They must be able to reach out to somebody when they need help, to be able to share a new idea or a new thought. They need to be exposed to issues, developments around security going on in other parts of the world that they could incorporate, and just encourage them to share. And we've done this partly, as I said, it's a work in progress, but we do this partly through the our connection with the staff college, where we have a trainers network. They're able to share their material, which others can pick up and use, and to always keep on adding material resources that they can use or adapt for their own purposes, and to share good practices. But we also need to keep abreast of training technology, and people my age are not good at that, but we do try. I know how to click a mouse, but I'm talking about there's a lot of technology that's coming out in AI that we can use. I've used some of it recently in developing scenarios for crisis management training, and to see what exactly is it that's available out there that we can use to enhance the learner experience. In TDS, we talked about serious gaming recently and how we can incorporate it into this. So it's about teaching new skills, providing new information, providing resources on a continuous basis. And that is everybody's responsibility, not just the training section. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. I think you used you mentioned AI twice now. That makes me curious what the stance of the others is on that. We have on WP side introduced AI in various ways already. Just for example, online training translation, which of course we treat AI as the helpful, eager but slightly dumb assistant that always have to have the oversight and the human in the loop in there. And we also used it to replace costly videos with avatars and so forth, which are much easier to and cheaper to develop, to translate, and all these things. In your organizations, Jamie, what is there a step towards AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of our strategic focuses, in fact. But at a sort of a practical level, in terms of training, we had this dichotomy recently. Ben mentioned we've taken the old SCP, the security certification program, and sort of built on our own take on things. I asked ChatGPT recently, how do I assess my participants so that they can't use AI to do the assessments? It's an amazing tool with great possibilities, and Notebook LM is another thing that I use a lot to build webinars and podcasts even, and things like that. But it's important that when we're building all of these training courses or opportunities, whatever it might be, however we might phrase it, you mentioned it, it's important to keep the human in the middle. One of the ways that we worked around this in terms of the all-round assessment for our participants in the most recent course, we built in an oral board. We made a simulated interview scenario. And so rather than asking them to, pound questions into a learning system or, multi-factor questionnaire, they had to do an old-fashioned question and answer session with some of the instructors. So did you retain the information that we've asked you? Can you apply it to a scenario? So it's going to be amazing tools. The reality of the matter is many of us work in locations and scenarios where there is no electricity, there is no internet. Claude or ChatGPT is not going to be sat on our shoulder. So particularly in the high risk, high threat types of scenarios, these participants need to be able to retain and demonstrate that information practically without reliance on technology.
Thank you, Jamie. Any efforts on the UNICEF side in that respect then?
I think, Florian, we're very much aligned, right? Doing short videos for staff awareness, right? To have visual rather than something to read or something to click through, different ways of getting the messages across. And then that translation, right? Translation into so many languages so that so many more colleagues can learn the real-time translation that you can get in these calls. I think that for us is where we found the most benefit, and we continue to explore other opportunities as you've outlined, as Jamie has. Thanks.
Thank you. As I picked it up from you, Ben, you want to have a closing word on AI?
Yeah, I knew I was getting myself into trouble when I mentioned AI because I have just a brief flirtation with it off and on. But yes, the more I use it at a personal level, for a lot of the tasks that I have, the more I realize what the potential is for making things for the training development a bit easier, improving the learner experience. And I don't think we've explored it enough. We need to do so in a systematic way. There's still a lot of, in my experience, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say fear, but a lot of suspicion around what AI is doing and what it gathers and all that. And we need to be a little circumspect in what we choose for use. And of course, like Jamie mentioned, it's a dumb assistant. So we also need to know exactly what the capabilities are and what we need to do to bring it to the standard. So it's for me, it's like fire. A good master, a good servant, but a bad master. So that's the way to look at it.
I like that analogy. Yes, indeed. You can burn your fingers, but yes, cook your meal. Thank you all. And when we look at we talked about the trainers now. We talked about how to keep them up to their game. What about the training contents, the standards? There's surely a need to standardize and ensure a common baseline across the system. On the other hand, we have a greater spectrum of environments that are pretty unique in their setup. Leaner footprints in the field. We have staff operating in context with a strong localization trend, and surely we're pushing for more localization. Where do you see the balance or the nexus between the consistency and the need for local adaptation? I think I said N, right?
Yeah. Ben, did you want to take this one? I see your mic is off.
I forgot to put it off after I spoke. But I think you talked about striking a balance, and I think that's incredibly important. I mentioned at the beginning that we all need to be singing from the same sheet. That is the UN policies and guidelines that are provided and procedures. But one size does not fit all in the specifics of each situation. And this is how we need to find the balance between getting everybody to sing from the same set of policies to operate, but also being able to address this. And I mentioned, training being a shared responsibility where the general standards that are shared through training are carried on into detail. So I think that's where the balance is. And if we see this security training as a shared responsibility, I think we get that done in a more systematic way. So it's all about making the training meaningful locally. And I think that's the biggest issue. Thanks.
Okay. So having a baseline there, I understand. How do we then measure success, and how do we measure impact? Are we evaluating how the training in the UNSMS is realistically translating into better decision making, how it prevents risks, how it mitigates impact, and how does it contribute, enables positive outcomes? Ben.
Okay, thanks. We in the UNSMS, we don't yet have a systematic way of reporting. And success isn't just like who attended the training or what numbers we've been able to reach. No, it's a lot more than that. It means tracking how staff applied what they've learned, reviewing incident trends, and getting feedback from missions. Essentially, we need to be asking, did this training make a difference in performance? Did it make operations more effective? Did it make our staff safer? And as I said, we don't have a systematic way of measuring this. We can look at, casualty figures, program implementation, but it's still a big system, and we don't have a systematic way of doing this. And so most of the time in training, our way of looking at this is mostly anecdotal. When we have follow-ups after training by participants who are pursuing something new that you introduce to them, or something that they may have learned from another participant. For example, for the training, I conducted one training in Libya on crisis management, and with the team, I helped the SMT. We identified a few gaps which they had not noticed, and so we started a back and forth on how they could strengthen that particular gap. For example, for SRM training, we look at the quality of SRMs that have been delivered over the years, and we saw, first of all, we saw improvement, but we also saw the gaps in the logical thinking. And so when we developed the material for security risk management, we kind of tried to address those gaps, to address the logic in it. And then also sometimes with the others, there's another example from Ethiopia, for example, where our team there was having difficulties with the host government because there was a bit of distrust. And the security advisor took, in his wisdom, it took about 2 years to achieve, but it was a little bit of interaction, training-like interaction, getting them to understand how the UN operates, explaining or pretending to explain the SRM to them, while getting them to look at our processes to assure them that we're not there doing any espionage. We actually need them. And over a 2-year period or so, the Ethiopian security services, at least, are more proactive towards UN security operations. They actually come to us more than they used to, and we have better access. So these are things that people follow up in training when you've been talking to them about host government cooperation, host government interaction. So it's a process of setting targets, and the targets are not always achieved through training, but it's training in combination with other actions on the ground that really, really get us results. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. And have you found a way to measure success of training?
No, I think I align with Ben, but it's really about learning, right? Right now, in reality, we're still measuring training activities, right? Not the impact. How many courses did we hold? Who attended? How many completed it successfully? I think we need to move beyond to measuring impact, but that's about measuring behavior change, which is a little bit more challenging. So some of the things that we're looking at really goes back into that learning culture that I talked about before, but engaging with staff, right? After a road mission, how did this go? How did that go? After an incident, in those after action reviews, looking at trends over time. In our duty station, when required, for example, the first aid response has been highly effective and remains highly effective. So that tells me that the first aid training has had a behavioral change and a positive impact, right? I think discussing not just with staff, but with managers, right? Team leaders, how is your team? Are they prepared? Is this clear to your team? How is this working in practice? Again, those after actions on decision making as well. We can review the decisions that were made during a crisis, have those discussions afterwards, what worked and what didn't, what was a knowledge failure, right? What was a coordination failure? How could we move these kinds of learnings forward together? And I'll mention the importance of our partners in this as well, because we don't operate in isolation. So in these after action, also including our partners, because we deliver together. And then lastly, the other thing that we're looking at are staff surveys, right? Every organization does a huge number of surveys locally, globally. So how can we incorporate security into some of those surveys to get more information on the actual impact of our training and learning events? Thanks, Florian.
Thank you, Anne. Last but not least, Jamie, any insights in how you measure?
And not much more than has already been said. We quantify outputs because it's easier than outcomes, right? But I think we have been taking a closer look at this recently, and what we've done specifically for our security professionals training program, the SCP evolution course that we made, is at the end of that particular course, each participant gets a very detailed performance report that then goes to their manager. And then 3 months and then 6 months down the line, we do a follow-up with them, do you feel more equipped to do your job? How has this been effective? And we get input from their managers as well. So at a small level, we've been trying to do better. But I think that the points that Anne and Ben made, overall, it's a vulnerability across the system. We're not especially good at monitoring and evaluation.
But we're getting there. Now, I hear you on the, and you alluded to that again, and on the AR after action review. It's a cultural thing, and to embed that and not have training as a standalone thingy, delivered once, in, out, that's it. Then we have nothing to measure, indeed. I think. Sorry, we've reached the 30 minutes to the end of our session, so I would really like to go to the questions and answers, or to the questions first that we got from the participants here. Thank you so far. Good that you lubricate your lips, because of the first question, and holds the word analysis, and that I think should go straight to you, which goes, and thank you for all participants for your questions. As security risks become more dynamic and less predictable, how can UNSMS better integrate field-generated security analysis into training, design, and preparedness frameworks to strengthen anticipatory response capacity across duty stations?
Thanks, Florian, and thank you, whoever asked this question. And I'll refer, we talked a little bit, we had a panel yesterday on crisis preparedness, anticipation, and response. And we talked quite a bit about different scenarios. What do we plan for? What do we decide? I think analysis is a key component to this. It's not about finding the perfect crystal ball scenario of what will happen, but it's about different scenarios on how the situation could possibly evolve, right? Using these to develop your plans, and then coming together to test those plans, right? And again, the real importance with partners, that this coming together with different scenarios, or talking through how we might respond or how we might anticipate crises, what are the triggers that we're looking for, who has what role, is a really crucial step, right? Mimicking that real world complexity that we face in the field, and that was referenced in the question. But really, analysis is kind of one of the key starting points for what possible futures are we looking at. Then we develop our plans, and then we test those plans. And again, doing that together, developing scenarios with our partners. What would our response look like with our partners? Talking those through together with our partners to identify gaps, so that when a crisis happens, we are more aware of who does what and how we all intend to work together moving forward. Thanks, Florian. And thank you, colleagues, for that question. Great one.
Yes, very nice one. Thank you, Anne. And yes, I think that tied to the point of making it realistic and really matter to people. Thank you for the second question, which is about simulations. In the context of increasingly complex and unpredictable operating environments, how can the United Nations Security Management System further strengthen the integration of training, capacity development, and practical simulation exercises to ensure that personnel across duty stations are not only compliant with security requirements, but also operationally prepared to respond effectively to real-time security incidents? Jamie, how about you?
Did you take a deep breath before you read that one? and thanks for asking me this question, not the one on analysis. I think, Florian, in short terms, it goes back to some of what we were saying before about this culture of practice and putting ourselves in positions whereby we are familiar in advance with situations that we might face in real life, right? So that's what a simulation is. It is to prepare people emotionally, physically, mentally for something that might happen to them down the line. And it's remarkably effective in terms of learning. Even in a short tabletop exercise, a discussion exercise can be very effective in putting into this mental memory, the muscle memory of the participants. Okay, I went through this. This is now happening to me. This is how I respond. So it doesn't need to be complex. It doesn't need to be expensive, and you don't have to travel to a faraway destination to do this. We can do it in the office. We can do it over lunch breaks. We can do it in dedicated periods. And I think what is the biggest challenge for us is shoehorning this requirement into the busy schedules of all of our people. Everybody has their very important day job, and most of us have day jobs that bleed into the night as well, particularly in times like we're seeing in the Middle East now, right? But it's really important to make this time, to deliberately make time to practice this, and to know and understand that these are important skills at an individual level, but also at an organizational level as well. You know, we often hear, oh, so and so can't attend this training drill because she or he has to go and attend a meeting with the minister or something. Okay, we need to find a way that somebody can prioritize bringing up their skill sets. Having said that, and something else I wanted to touch on what Anne was saying earlier about when she was talking about the decision makers. I think another very, again, practicable and important skill is to take out those decision makers when we do run these exercises or the tabletops, and for the more junior leaders that Anne was talking about, give them the opportunity to stand up and to take up the next level of responsibility. It's very seldom that we see serious security incidents happening at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning when everybody's in the office, the internet's working, and the weather is sunny, right? It happens in the middle of the night when the operations manager is on R&R, the security officer is on mission somewhere up country, and so on. So it's really important that the people who are expected to fill those gaps are given the opportunity to practice doing so before it's thrust upon them when the brown stuff's hitting the worry thing.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Accidents or incidents never happen when they just come inconvenient somehow. So I agree with that sense of realism in there that needs to be thrown at people. I have an interesting question here about balancing realism with trauma, psychological impact. Ben, the question goes: realism is necessary, especially with stress exposure training, but how do we balance realism with the potential for causing reliving trauma? Heat-styled courses can and do unintentionally harm participants. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a challenging part of what we do whenever we try to give people, our participants, a sense of what they could experience in the field and how they should respond. Usually we precede the training with a lot of caveats. If you've been in this situation, we actually find out from our safe trainers where we have that exposure. We say, if you've been in this kind of situation and are not comfortable with this, please let us know, in confidence. We usually have stress counselors to provide at least psychosocial first aid during the course. People have reacted like that. But I think it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on, but we're never really going to get rid of, because some people don't even know what triggers them. They say they're fine, and then the exercise starts and something happens. So it's a question of prevention through alerting them before exercises and saying, this is what is going to happen. You're going to have these kinds of things, these kinds of scenarios, without giving too much of the game away. But at the same time, having the means to respond immediately if something goes wrong. It's a big challenge, and I don't think I have the answer. The answer lies somewhere in the middle between prevention and mitigation. Thanks.
Florian, can I jump in to add?
Yes,
I wholeheartedly
yes,
agree with Ben. It's really great that facilitators give notice. And what I've seen is that the really good, experienced colleagues running these courses also watch the participants, particularly in these more stressful things, as the situation evolves. So even if a colleague hasn't said anything, they know I need to pause or I need to pull that individual aside just to help take care of our colleagues, because it can very much cause a reaction that is unplanned, right? And we recognize that so many of our field colleagues who go through these trainings have been through so many real life experiences. But for those who facilitate these courses out there, that ability to pay attention and watch, and don't be afraid to say, let's pause for just a second, or let me just go speak to that individual discreetly, quietly. Those are the really good trainers that really make this a positive experience, even under difficult circumstances. Thanks.
Any hands-on from you, Jamie, on that one?
No, it's a good policy in life to agree with whatever Anne says. And I think just to sort of emphasize it a little bit, it's really important on the trainers, the facilitators, to have those human qualities, right? We must recognize that we are in a human industry. And so I think sometimes there is a tendency on the part of some of our colleagues to fall back on a former police or military doctrine way of doing things and shouting at people and telling them to get down in the mud and do 10 push-ups, or something awful is going to happen to you. That's not always the best approach. And being able to blend that stick and carrot approach to training is a really important skill set for trainers, and will get better results.
So yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The next question. How does UNSMS ensure that online capacity building initiatives remain practical, engaging, and operationally relevant?
I'll start. We spoke a little bit about the weaknesses to online learning. I think these broader capacity building initiatives, what helps them succeed is, one, they are not designed as a PowerPoint lecture on Teams, right? They are designed to be engaging. Again, post questions, put colleagues into different working groups, have them discuss. That peer-to-peer learning is important. Something that really works well for us, again, is examples from the field, right? It's not a headquarters down. It's what are the colleagues in Sudan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, right? In Mali, having them share and discuss so that we learn in a peer-to-peer format that just happens to be online. I think colleagues are always interested in what's going on, what other colleagues are learning now, or what they're dealing with now. So again, that ability to go global and bring people together is a positive of these online learning. So using that to help encourage that engagement and that sharing is really, really one of the most effective things that I found in online learning. Thanks.
Ben, yes, please.
Just to add to that, and I agree with Anne, but I'm just saying, in my own experience, I find that instructional design is a specialized skill, and they have, people with that kind of training have the ability to bring online, or have the training and expertise to bring online training to life. My first attempts at developing online training sounded like a textbook or a paper. But when I turned it over to the learning support and design team, they brought it to life. Participants felt that they were being directly addressed. There were changes in the form of presentation. We didn't get it right the first time. So I think we must invest, if we're going to be doing a lot more online training, we must invest a bit in getting our trainers training instructional design or higher instructional design. They make a big difference. And maybe that is something that everybody would like to consider. Traditional trainers don't usually do that kind of design, but when you're doing online, I think it's a specialized. We should pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Allow me to go to the next question. How does UNSMS ensure that? Sorry, I just had that. Sorry. How do you ensure that training for each audience, security personnel, all workforce, and security decision makers reinforces rather than operates in isolation from the others? Anybody volunteering to take that question? Jamie?
Yeah, I can jump in quickly, Florian. I think there's a couple of different ways of approaching this, and one is, you know, again, as a young sailor 1,000 years ago, I was told it's not just enough to know my job, but I have to know the job of the person above me and the person above them, at least to some extent. And I think that that's important for us when we're considering training and learning management, you know, across what we do. We have to consider that for some of the staff members, they need to understand what are the security accountabilities and responsibilities of the senior managers and so on. So it's not enough to develop and deliver training in isolation for a specific personal group of people. I think there has to be a blended approach to it. And then when we are doing practical exercises and practical learning, it's important that each of those stages, that each of those elements are exercised and trained together. So again, you know, we go back to the idea of a crisis management tabletop exercise. It's not sufficient for the security professional to run it with the operations team, for example. It's important that the office leadership are present. It's important that someone from the drivers is there because she or he may have, you know, input into, you know, if the answer is we take this person to the hospital in vehicle 6, well, the senior driver may say, actually, vehicle 6 is out for maintenance, so blah, blah, blah. You take my point. So there needs to be this connectivity and interaction across levels. It's, you know, stovepipes and isolation and all this stuff. It's deleterious to efficacy.
Thank you. I think that was a very comprehensive answer to that. The next question that I see is, where do you see the most critical gaps in security learning today? I think that can go out to everyone. Starting with Ben.
Thank you. For me, I've always seen training as a way to enhance operations, to address operational needs. And so if security management operations do not require a particular kind of training, there's really no point in putting it out if it doesn't fix anything that they need. There's, again, the absence of a feedback loop from operations to say, these are the deficiencies we're observing. Can you train the people on that? A formalized one. Of course, we get to talk to desk chiefs, we get to talk to security advisors in the field. They share their documents. We have access to some of them. We have access to, but a more formalized way of doing it such that at the beginning of the year, I don't have to guess too much or rely on my own weights too much. I have a system that gives me the feedback from operations and says, we're weak in this area, we need more training of this kind in this area. And if we could have that, I mean, it would make what we deliver from training a lot more effective. Just what I think. Thanks.
Jamie, before you agree to what Anna has said, I'll give the word to you.
Sorry, you threw me there. Like, I think one of the approaches that we've taken in the past, and again, it's a weakness in our position that we do it so infrequently, is we do an assessment of a self-assessment process of people at different levels and on what is their own assessment of their competencies, of the skills that are required of them as a security decision maker or as a staff member or as a security practitioner. And from that, we try to develop what are our training priorities and so on. I think the reality is a little bit like Ben was alluding to is, you know, we do tend to default to the path of least resistance and say, okay, we need to do 5 WSATs, 3 SAFEs, and a partridge in a pear tree. But when we actually do take the time to look at what they, a bottom up, people are telling us this is what we need, or this is actually an assessment of our capacity and competence, tailoring the training that we both develop and then deliver, again, it's much more effective.
Yes, please. You've already opened your mic.
Thanks, colleagues, and I wholeheartedly agree with Ben and Jamie on this. I think I'll mention two other things from my perspective that are critical gaps, is particularly when it comes to decision makers, and again, reinforcing decision makers at all levels. As security personnel, we still try to do security in isolation, but that the reality is that this comes together with program needs, emergency response needs, business continuity, partners, and operating with them. So we need to be better at working with decision makers, where security is one piece of the training or the exercise or the learning or the tabletop. So how we integrate better with others to do training together, right? Because then it's more realistic and they get more value out of it. And I welcome the colleague who put the comment in the chat. The other thing that we're not good at is that security professionals from all of the agencies and so many of our partners do so much of this, but we don't have eyes on, we don't share, right? What worked, what didn't work, what scenarios are you using? How are you engaging with field offices on this learning topic, right? So sharing amongst ourselves, we don't do well. And I think we would make great strides if we just got a handle on what already exists, the lessons we have from those sessions that are already run, particularly those local specific things that are contextualized. I really appreciate that exists out there, that we could learn so much from each other. Thanks.
I think the point that Jamie made earlier to the previous question, you have to understand what the one above and the one above that one does, is that applies. I mean, you need to understand here as well all the implications that a country director or rep needs to take into consideration, but also what the people in the office left and right are contributing there and how we can support them. Agreed. But when we talk about learning and development here, yes, I think we also need to learn from each other. That's a good point inside of learning. You mentioned the decision makers, and I think there's an interesting question from the forum that combines a couple of aspects, but points it to an interesting direction. Given the resources required to deliver security-related training, what are the best practices for measuring? No, sorry, measuring was clear. In an environment of shrinking resources and competing priorities, how do you sustain that commitment to lifelong security learning without it being the first thing cut when budget come under pressure? So how do we convince people that security is the last to cut, and insecurity training is surely the very, very last to cut it all? How do you convince your decision makers in UNICEF?
I think this is a great question, and if I had the answer, then we wouldn't have the question, right? I think there's a couple of things. We work in a complex world with a lot of security challenges. Decision makers know this, right? I think one of the things is how we come together better, right, as a security training community, but also with other sections, as I mentioned, right, to show value. Complex realities on the field mean complex scenarios where security is just a piece, right? So working together with other colleagues who also need to be running training so that we find efficiencies together and also make it more realistic. And then I think we make use of those different modalities, right? There is online, there is in person. As Ben mentioned, there is capacity, particularly in TDS, on different learning design that you can tap into. So how we work together, and again, share. If something works, share it with others so that they can also try. Thanks.
Ben, how do you keep TDS in business?
Luckily, I don't have to, not anymore. My boss is here. But
what's your advice to Jeff?
Yeah, well, not really mad, but the reality is that we're going to get limited resources, and everybody's going to take a hit in terms of the resources that are available, some more than others. So it has always been, the way I look at it is, yeah, there's only so much, and Jeff has done a lot of advocacy for TDS and, the directors above, but in the end, we're going to get a finite amount of resources. And so we look at what we have to do, how we scale it up to reach the audience that we're supposed to reach, how we create access. Usually we are looking at online learning, but it's not the only way. There's other ways in which we can multiply. And we started this process also of looking for free online courses or virtual courses that were being offered by various institutions that fitted the needs of our audience, and to share this on a regular basis. So it's making the best with the resources that you have, and usually you fall short of what is needed, but you don't get the dissatisfaction of knowing that you didn't do your best with it, because we don't have very much control over what the organization or the member states will give us, or Jamie and Anne will give us from the organizations to conduct training. So yeah, there's a limit, and you just make the best with it, not necessarily more, but as good as it can be. Thank you.
Jamie, how do you continue living the dream?
But it's you can have push-pull to this, right? At a very brutal level. If training is needed at the country office level, put it in the SRM. It thereby becomes an accountability issue, and therefore they must do it. We'll find a way, make the resources happen. A slightly more nuanced approach that we find effective is Donald Rumsfeldian, there are unknown unknowns. And for a lot of people, when they are promoted into leadership responsibilities as security decision makers, there are these unknown unknowns, right? They're promoted because they're good technicians, or they're a very good project manager, or they've been time with the organization, whatever it is. They don't know what it is that they are responsible for. So one of the approaches that we've taken recently is shining a little bit of a light using AI, using small video clips. We're trying to move with the times, and people can scroll through like on TikTok or FaceCrack or whatever it is now. And we give them these little bite-sized videos that say, hey, you are now accountable for these categories of people. For more information, come see the UNDP security office. And so, you build that pull effect. They want to learn and they want to know more. And I think, from a broader perspective, that's probably more beneficial to a learning long life approach than trying to cram it down their throats as an accountability or a compliance matter.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, we've come to the end of our session here. Thank you so much. Been very enlightening for me. I hope we provided something for our participants online. I think a few themes stood out. Learning must be continuous. We cannot have learning in isolation. There must be a learning culture. We cannot have one or the other. Blended approaches work best when paired with practice. Frontline access and decision maker judgment need deliberate tailoring. And we need to find ways to measure beyond just completing training courses in a less with less environment where we need to prioritize. Relevance becomes even more important. We have 1 minute left. That means 20 seconds for each of you to tell everybody how they can strengthen their security learning within the next 90 days. And first.
I think just thank you very much for the opportunity to be on this panel. I think there were a lot of ideas presented during the discussion. So let's keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Jamie.
Kudos to everybody who tuned in to listen to this. That shows a commitment to learning about security. Do what Ben said, go online. There are 1 million courses available to it. Take accountability for some of your own professional development. Don't expect the organization to do it all for you. Over.
And it give you the closing word, Ben.
I wish it wasn't the closing word, but thank you, thank you for this opportunity to everybody. Just to say, because we're dealing with partners in the humanitarian world, I think we don't do enough in terms of collaboration on training, and we should be reaching out to each other. There's a lot that we can learn from each other. I've seen it in practice, and I appreciate everybody's taking the time to be here for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was the last word. Thank you all. Have a good one.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Well done to you, Florian. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Florian. Excellent.
Well done. Thanks. Ciao, ciao.